I'm Bryce Futch.
And I'm Tony Melton.
And this is The Way Forward.
Welcome to episode 4. This is an overview episode of China. This will be a short one, but an important one. Before we discuss some of the finer-tuned issues and greater nuance, it's important that everyone that's listening has an accurate view of the big pieces of understanding China, how we relate to them, and the issues that affect our world. So for this episode, I'm going to interview Bryce, who is our resident expert on the subject, and get him to give kind of a summary answer of some of these big topics. And then for this episode in particular, if you guys have questions, this would be a great one for you to submit those through the website or through the Facebook or the podcast, and we can respond to those and give you a little bit more accurate view of China. So first question. Bryce, tell us about the government of China.
First, I have to walk back your comments as I'm the resident expert. I may be the expert in the room, but I am by no means a expert on China. I agree with former Chinese Ambassador John Huntsman, who said that there are no Chinese experts. There are only Chinese enthusiasts or specialists. I am trying to become more of a Chinese specialist because of everything that they do and just the incredible role that China plays in the world. So the type of government that China has, they are regarded as a one-party communist dictatorship. And they're considered that because the Communist Party is the only party in power. It's the only party in China, and I mean that strictly in the political sense, because communists, as we all know, do not have parties. That was a joke. That was a political joke. But yes, no, they are a one-party dictatorship. Their current president is Xi Jinping, and President Xi is getting ready to start an unprecedented third term. So far, I believe he is the 5th president that China has had. They've all held to a 2-term standard. But many people think that President Xi is following in the footsteps of Mao and really trying to bring China back to prominence throughout the world, and many people expect him to hold on to power for the foreseeable future.
What are some other governments, just to give some context for our listeners, what are some other governments that have had similar governmental structures as China does now? See if this can help us understand a little bit more about maybe what's their philosophy.
Sure. So the best example would be the USSR, the Soviets. They were similarly ruled, except they went through different phases. At one point they had a troika, so there was like 3 people that were running the show. But they're the most similarly aligned, which I think is interesting because the Russians and the Chinese do not get along well. They have historically had a large number of conflicts between the two of them, and there's a lot of tension between those two communist countries. And the kind of what you have going on is you have Hong Kong, which was originally a Chinese territory. The Brits ended up leasing it for 99 years. Their lease ran out in 97. But a part of the agreement in returning Hong Kong to China was that the Chinese would not affect the day-to-day life of the people who live in Hong Kong for 50 years. So they were supposed to have 50 years of self-rule, doing what they wanted. But the Communist Party pretty much immediately started to try and have influence over the government of Hong Kong. There was a number of different laws that were passed that people in Hong Kong ended up protesting and getting overturned, but they were very pro-communist regime. And then just recently, last year was really when China took over formally in Hong Kong and has started to impose their rule there. There is a difference between the Communist Party of China, which is abbreviated the CCRP, is the People's Republic of China, which is what we all know is China today. Taiwan is the Republic of China. Taiwan came about through a civil war between Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong in 1949. The Republic of China left the Chinese mainland and moved to Taiwan, and that is where they have been ever since. So the people that are in the Republic of China, Taiwan, believe that they are the real China because they were there before. Mao was the revolutionary that came up and challenged their authority. We actually fought on the side of the Republic of China during the Second World War. Flying Tigers, famous John Wayne movie. We had people that would fight the Japanese because Japan invaded China first, and so we had people there working with China, and then we supported the Chinese after the fact. But then Mao took over, ousted the Republic of China to Taiwan. The People's Republic of China was established at that point in time in 1949, and has basically been a one-man show ever since.
So, we're going to talk a lot about Hong Kong and Taiwan specifically in later episodes, and so it's important for our listeners to understand kind of the dynamics for for how those two countries relate to China. Would it be fair to say that they are not ethnically distinct? All three of those have people that are Chinese,
Yes.
or are they all the same ethnicity? And historically, would you even say that they were the same nationality until
Yes.
Mao came along?
They were. So there was a period of time called the Warring States period where basically there was a large number of civil wars that were happening within China. You had different local warlords that were fighting each other, but it would be very similar to everybody being Anglo-Saxon, right? Mm-hmm. So they're all ethnically Chinese. They have a very similar shared culture, shared history until Mao came about around the turn of the century, and then Mao came. I guess really the communism started in China fairly quickly. Mao was born in the early 20th century, early 1900s, and then in 49, when the Communist Party took over, is really when we started to see a divergence in culture. And so the culture of the Republic of China is very democratic and very pro-Western.
That's Taiwan.
Yep. And Taiwan has had formalized relationship with the United States since 1949, where the People's Republic of China, which is China, has not.
Keyword difference being People's Republic versus
Correct.
just the Republic.
Correct. Yep. Think communism, people. That's what they. It's always the people's whatever. And so the People's Republic of China, the communist Chinese, actually helped the North Koreans during the Korean War. MacArthur was pushing the North Koreans almost all the way out of the peninsula, where Mao raised an army of volunteers, was what they were called. But in reality, they were regular army soldiers, people that volunteered for the army, and they came in mass and drove the United States almost completely off the peninsula into the south.
Korea is split in two.
Correct. Yep.
So, you mentioned earlier that that China does not have parties, but in a sense, given that Hong Kong and Taiwan are ethnically homogenous with China, the only real difference between them is their political perspective.
Correct.
And their political identity for their own geography. So they do have, China in the general sense does have political parties, except that they've actually particularized those parties into political structures, i.e. nations.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. So that gives I think that's a helpful context in understanding what's happening now. Mm-hmm. And you I know we're going to talk about this in the future, but just give us a general overview of kind of what's happening now with China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan.
Right. So China formally took over Hong Kong in 1997. Technically, Hong Kong was a part of China.
2 years before they were allowed to.
Sorry, no. 97 was when the British handed them over. Then, but then almost immediately they started making changes.
So the 50-year time clock started in.
Is just 50-year time clock started in 97. So they were supposed to have 50 years from 1997.
Seems like a really
to do their own thing.
Arrangement.
Right. I agree.
You can't do this unless it's 50
right. And I don't know. I need to look more in the context of why they decided on the 50-year timeline. I don't know that, but that's what they decided. And then last year, this past year, actually, it wasn't last year. It was this year, 21, that China formally came in and said, I'm the captain now, and took over everything. So Hong Kong still has their own government, their own legislative branch, all that kind of stuff, but they are firmly under the control of the Chinese.
Puppets.
Yes, and China is continuing to grow their influence there every single day. Taiwan, China has always claimed that Taiwan is a part of China and should be a part of China. Taiwan has said the exact opposite and said we want nothing to do with you. If anything, you're a part of us, and you're the aberration, not us.
You're the usurpers.
Right. And so because of that, China has made several different plays for Taiwan throughout history. None of them have escalated to any kind of serious conflict so far, but there was some shelling of some islands around the Taiwan mainland, because Taiwan is an island, and then there's some smaller islands around it. But
when we hear about disputed waters,
South China Sea,
is this with regards to Taiwan?
Yes, it is.
So when we hear, because I've heard about that, I'm not particularly informed about these issues or these conflicts, but I've heard a lot about the South China Sea, disputed waters, them invading certain areas. This is their attempt to reincorporate the Republicans.
Yes, that would be an accurate statement. Okay. Yes, and so a lot of people are concerned that China will make a stronger military play for Taiwan within the next 5 years. The U.S., while we do not have any formalized, if China attacks Taiwan, we will nuke China. So there's different types of relationships in foreign policy. So NATO falls under the nuclear umbrella of the United States. So if a NATO country is attacked by Russia or another country, another country, either with enough conventional forces to justify nuclear action or with a nuclear attack, the United States will provide a nuclear response. We do not have that same agreement with Taiwan. However, we do provide Taiwan with large amounts of defensive munitions, training, all of that type of stuff. We're basically trying to equip Taiwan like we tried to equip the South Vietnamese at the end of the Vietnam War. However, because we're on the front end and not the back end of it, many people believe that this will be a winning strategy in Taiwan.
Right. In one of our episodes, we talk about how you can't really assess a thing unless you know what it's for,
right,
or where it's going. So let's do that with China. Where is China going? What are the things as a country that they desire? What's their strategic plan? What's their vision as a country? And how does that impact some of the initiatives that they're taking around the world or even more locally?
Sure. So China is what's called a hegemon. So a hegemon is a regional superpower. So they're not necessarily the baddest kid on the world block, but they are the baddest kid in their regional block. China wants to take that hegemonic nature and move it into an actual superpower. So they are primarily looking for ways to overcome the United States via economics. They're looking to create more GDP, which then gives them more money to spend on foreign aid and et cetera, which then helps them grow their world influence. China so far has shown a serious interest in making those economic ties, making it really hard to cut ties business-wise with them. They're investing in countries that don't have any money, that the United States is not willing to invest in, building those regional relationships. They call that their Belt and Road Initiative or the New Silk Road. A lot of countries in Africa are a part of that program. There's some countries in Asia as well. China has overtly said that they are on this 100-year plan. Michael Pillsbury writes about this in his book, The 100-Year Marathon, which I highly recommend. And basically, at the end of that 100 years, they will be the superpower. And at that point in time, it's only a matter of degrees as to how much of a Chinese control they will exert on the rest of the world. Their surveillance state is second to none. A lot of people think that Huawei's expansion into 5G is supposed to help pave the way for that control in these other Western countries. Even if they may not be aware of the control that they're starting to exert. China wants to be the world leader. Xi talks about this in his speeches. He talks about this in his writings. They are on a long-term trajectory to be the greatest country in the history of the world.
That's an important thing to know about a country. I mean, at one time, Britain, it was part of their DNA, their vision for being a country, that they were going to exert control on the rest of the world. You know, they started a lot of colonies.
Sure.
You know, America has had this kind of outreaching mentality.
Yep.
Then there's countries like Canada.
Right.
Like Canada is very content to be Canada.
Right.
They're not like a super
unless you're
ambitious.
In Quebec, and then you don't want to be Canada. You don't be anything but French.
Yeah, but so like understanding a country as ambitious,
right?
Even before you make a value statement on it,
right?
Or is it a good ambition or a bad ambition, or what did they represent?
Sure.
We can certainly say that China is very ambitious.
Yes, we can.
They would like to be numero uno.
Right, and that helps us, like you said, it helps us understand what their reasoning is for when they make decisions. It helps us be able to cut them off diplomatically before things happen. Yeah, it does make a big difference.
Philanthropy.
Correct. No, it is not.
Okay.
Not even close.
Great. This is a great overview. I think that's really going to set up people to have an accurate understanding just how they're accomplishing certain goals that they have and how those goals fit into their overall plan, who they are, what does this have to do with their government, Taiwan, Hong Kong. So thanks for walking us through that.
You bet. Thanks for the time. I'm Bryce Futch.
I'm Tony Melton.
And you've been listening to The Way Forward.